25 years of fearless and impactful journalism. Tonight on Top Story, Attorney General set to seize properties worth $3 million from former Deputy National Security Coordinator under John Mahama administration and 2 ex-top officials of NCA found guilty for causing financial loss to the state. We have details on the case, which is the first corruption-related matter to have successfully been prosecuted under President Akufo-Addo involving former NDC appointees. That's coming up on Top Story, brought to you by Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready? Bond savings and loans, your success, our passion. GASM, the nation builder. And it's a major judicial victory. The first corruption-related case to have successfully been prosecuted under President Akufo-Addo involving former NDC appointees. The Attorney General, Gloria Ekufo, acting on the orders of the High Court, is now set to seize properties worth $3 million from former Deputy National Security Coordinator under the John Mahama administration, Alhaji Salifu Osman, and 2 ex-top officials of the NCA found guilty for causing financial loss to the state. They were today handed jail terms ranging from 6 years to 5 years. Former NCA Board Chairman Eugene Bafuboni, former Director General of the NCA William Matthew Tete Tevier, and a former Deputy Coordinator of the National Security were found by the court to have been reckless and acted with impunity in the purchase of cyber surveillance equipment worth $4 million. Court correspondent Joseph Akable was there for us. He sat through sittings. I spoke to him earlier. Now, Joseph, let's talk about the state's case against the accused persons. What is it?
So this NCA case was actually the first corruption-related matter that this administration filed in court. It was sent to the court in February of 2018, where 5 individuals, 4 former government appointees, and a businessman were accused of causing financial loss and stealing an amount, various sums that amounted to $4 million in the purchase of cyber surveillance equipment. The AG's office had said that this purchase was without the NCA board's approval. The transaction, they said, was also outside the mandate of the NCA and was also not captured in its budget. An amount of $4 million is said to have been withdrawn from the accounts of the NCA, and $1 million out of this was deposited into the accounts of the Israeli company. The remaining $3 million, according to the state, was lodged in the account of a businessman, George Derek Opon, who acted as a rep of the Israeli company they were purchasing the equipment from.
And what reasons did the judge give for his decision?
The judge said the evidence that had been advanced by the state does indicate that these individuals, 3 of them actually, acted with impunity and recklessness that occasioned the loss to the state. He said also the evidence supported the claim that indeed there was no board approval, neither the NCA's budget captured this particular transaction.
Now let's run through the jail terms.
The NCA board chairman Eugene Bafuboni is to serve a jail term of 6 years. Former Director General William Tete is to serve for 5 years, while Alhaji Mimina Osman, he is a former Deputy National Security Coordinator, is to be in jail for 5 years as well. The other 2 accused person, Naya Ensao, who is a former board chair, who is a former board member of the NCA, had earlier been discharged by the court after the Court of Appeal overturned the High Court's dismissal of his application for submission of no case. The other accused person, George Derek Opon, was acquitted and discharged in the court presided over by Justice Eric Chebafu.
Now, Joseph, something interesting also happened. I will talk about that, but first tell us about the atmosphere in court.
It was quite a tense atmosphere, heavy security presence right from the outside of the court through to the compound and eventually the courtroom itself. Due to the social distancing issues, not many people are allowed into the courtroom. And the other bit I'll tell you relates to the other accused person who didn't come into the courtroom. But all the others were present right after sentencing. Their lawyers made a case for mitigation, saying that some were advanced in age, were first-time offenders, as well as being persons who had not engaged in any crime or even have accusations leveled against them. And so the court should consider that in announcing and issuing the jail term. The sad aspect is that right after the decision was given, they were whisked away. Some of them came with their wives and children, and their wives and children had to leave without them.
Okay, so let's get to it now. We understand one of the accused persons did not enter the courtroom. What reason did he give? Tell us a bit more about it.
When the case was called, his lawyers had indicated that he was actually stuck in traffic and was on his way coming. His lawyers indicated that he was stuck in traffic and was on his way coming, and so they were making calls to get him to come in. But when I had finished with the Osafo case, which I'll be telling you about shortly, and I went out, I actually met him outside the court premises. He was walking in. Shortly after, I saw him come out again and sit in his car. And the interesting thing is that when we finished with the decision that we were coming out, the PS News had reached him that he had been acquitted and discharged, and so we saw him come down from his car, meet a few family members, shook hands with them, and he seemed to be in very high spirits and was laughing and smiling, and ran quickly into his car when he saw our cameras come closer to him. And so the businessman George Derek Opon was acquitted and discharged and is free to go.
Now, Joseph, let's stay a while longer in court. It's been a busy day for you. Let's talk about the Auditor General's contempt case in court. What exactly was it? Give us the details.
That case relates to the surcharge of $1 million that Mr. Domelevo issued against the senior minister. It relates to an audit that he carried out, said there was no valid contract backing the work that was done by Colin Associates for government, for which reason that amount was paid. And so he asked that the senior minister's office refunds that particular amount. The senior minister filed an appeal challenging the surcharge, and he had argued in court that the Auditor General was required to file a response to his appeal within 14 days, but failed to do so. The Auditor General had explained that his office received it, his secretary placed it on his desk, but was along with a pile of documents that he was working on, including an audit report for Parliament, which he was trying to finish up because it was in December. And so that was the reason why he didn't see that appeal quickly. And immediately he saw it, he actually wrote to the lawyers for the senior minister asking that they agree for an extension of time for him to file his response. But the court said that explanation is untenable and that is an afterthought. And the court said that he expects such office to be judicious in terms of responding particularly to appeals, because citizens have the right to appeal to the findings of the Auditor General's office. The court also noted that the work the Auditor General does is important, for which reason it opted not to hand him a fine, and also said that the custodial sentence around this period was not ideal because of the COVID-19. And so Justice Efia Saribotre opted to caution and discharge him in simple terms, saying that you have done something that is wrong, I find you guilty, don't do this again. But yes, she said she expects that the Office of the Auditor General subsequently will be prompt and act in terms of the aggression it does in issuing surcharge and allowance in the same manner to respond to appeals that are filed in court.
Impeccable delivery on issues happening in court today by court correspondent Joseph Akabley. So tonight, the Attorney General is set to seize properties worth $3 million from former Deputy National Security Coordinator under the John Mahama administration and 2 ex-top officials of the NCA. We know about the former Director General of the NCA, William Matthew Tetetevier, and of Board Chairman Eugene Bafo Boni. They are supposed to pay this $3 million, and they've been found guilty for causing financial loss to the state. So the Attorney General is on that part to see properties worth $3 million from them. But let's bring in a private legal practitioner, Mr. Martin Bebu. We are grateful for your time here on Top Story. So this is a matter you must have followed keenly. What was your immediate reaction when you heard this?
Wow. Emefa, it's not easy to put across some ways that you consider as immediate reaction as such. I think I would want to go into the substance of your question in other areas, then we can come back to my personal comments.
Well, because this is an issue that we know that one of the first cases that government had set out to prosecute, and it looks like we've seen a logical conclusion to the matter. So knowing that you are a legal practitioner and knowing that you followed it closely, we're hoping that we'll get an immediate reaction on it. But let's get into the substance of it. Really, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one thing is clear to me that this is not the end of the battle. Not at all, because knowing the stature of these persons, they are not going to take the decision at this point as a final decision. So almost certainly we are bound to see an appeal in this case. That is how come the first question I said I want to organize my thoughts. So and even because there will be an appeal, and also considering that some people have been acquitted in this case, it's not easy to give an opinion, because you don't know what else will happen in future. You see it. So I think for this particular case, I'll be very cautious not to stick out my neck to go one way or the other. Yes, let's be cautious, because can you imagine, you see, when this case first started, all the comments we made against these persons, but today as it stands, 2 have been declared innocent. Remember Dr. Owusu and South, he was acquitted and discharged by the Court of Appeal, you see, and then in this final judgment, Derek Opon has also been acquitted and discharged. So when I cast my mind back and remember all the derogatory comments we made and all that, you see that I've lost appetite for any further derogatory comments. I would rather hold judgment and see what happens in the Court of Appeal. So in the interim, the judge is done well by saying at least they should see some assets. So that's the one I'm excited about. Let's do middle of the road. That, okay, these persons can pursue their appeal, but in the meantime, if we can get any assets for them, we should take that and preserve that, so that in the event that they lose their appeals all the way to the Supreme Court, the state will not come up short. At least we will get some property. Because for the other side is that sending a person to jail without the state recovering even one peswa, it's not good. It's not in our interest. We should also be very much interested in recovering any lost property. So the order that the state should see some assets is what I would consider very laudable, so that at the end of the day, if it turns out that yes, they are truly guilty, then at least we know that we'll get some money back. And also, if there will be jail terms, so be it.
But you earlier made mention of the pending appeals, for instance. I was going to get to that. So there are pending appeals relating to the High Court's decision on the submission of no case. Should the court not have waited for the outcome of that before where we are today has happened?
As far as I'm aware, Dr. Usa and Sound's appeal, the submission of no case, the Court of Appeal allowed the appeal. He won. That's how come he was declared acquitted and discharged. Unless there's another appeal that I'm not aware of. So, as far as I'm aware, he won the appeal, and so he was acquitted and discharged. So, he's not part of this judgment that was delivered today. You say, well, I'm saying that these ones that were convicted today, they are going to appeal. It's different. I mean, looking at past experience and all that, and the prison terms, it's incredible. I mean, there's no way I believe that they would just accept it as their fate and serve the sentences. They will appeal. That's the point I'm making. And that's why I said then in that case, we shouldn't go into the merits again, because there will be an appeal.
Okay. Well, but the concern also is the kind of signal then it sends for those who are on the waiting list for prosecution. They should be worried at this point, shouldn't they?
Oh, naturally, and if it's not a joke to go through a criminal prosecution. So even without this judgment, the commencement of the criminal prosecution itself is enough worry to them. You see, of course, but today's judgment may also just reinforce the fear. Okay, but moving forward, I think one of the things we can do to help our justice system so that it doesn't increase the stress and the tension of a criminal trial is that we should relax the grounds on which bail is granted to a convict. So you see, these persons we've mentioned, these are persons who have fixed places of abode. They are they were senior public officers. So after a conviction, it should be easy for them to get bail so that they continue the fight. And as I said, maybe get more properties from them as security while they go through the appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, so that when they are done and they've lost, then they can serve the jail terms. Let me mention an example to you. You see, in Brazil, Lula da Silva, the former president, you see, they took him, he was convicted, put in jail, and then he was prevented from standing for another election. Then after the election, the Brazilian Supreme Court now came up with a decision that henceforth we should allow the accused persons to stay out of jail whilst pursuing their appeals. When they are done and they've lost all the way, then they can go serve. So even take the example of this: out of 5 persons, 2 were acquitted and discharged. So if we keep all these persons in jail and then they win their appeals, what will happen? So I'm thinking that just as now we are middle income and are making progress, we should begin to relax some of those rules. Don't just throw in a person to jail because he's lost at the first round, especially when you know that this person is definitely going all the way to the Supreme Court. That is what we should be interested in, because of these things, as we grow, you don't know tomorrow who else would be before the court on some charges. So we should seek to make the law also grow with our middle income status.
Well, but finally, Mr. Apawu, the concern about Mr. William Matthew Tete TV's condition. We're told about a health condition, for instance, that he has kidney-related issues. Would that also make a good case or a grounds for appeal or mitigating the sentence?
Absolutely. So the first thing it will do is that to make very good grounds for him to be granted the pending appeal. You see, because we all know at least that he's sick and that he's been attending at Kolegu. Let me not go further into those details, but we all know that. So that should be good grounds for him to be granted bail pending his appeal, and then we take it from there. As I said, let's relax. A lot of the laws we are using date from 1960, so they will tell you that they don't grant bail on appeal lightly. It's not lightly granted, but then they're dealing with human lives. So what if he wins his appeal? So it's time for us to take a look at it and relax it a bit for sick people and also for persons who are well rooted in our society and who don't pose a slight risk.
So then, I said that was my last, but I'm itching to ask this one also about what this whole sentencing and the judgment from the court today means for the AG's department, for instance, knowing that this is the very first that they've gone through and seen logical conclusion.
Oh, naturally, they will be happy that they've succeeded, although we all know that prosecutors don't go to court to win by all means, no. By their profession, it is the case that they present the case to the court for the court to decide. But we also know that as human beings, when they win, it goes well for them, because you know that in the past, the Attorney General's department has come in for serious flack for one reason or another. So for this case, the way it's ended, of course, it's going to earn them some goodwill. But as I've said, for me, I'm cautious because these guys are going to appeal. So I want to see how the appeal will pan out.
Mr. Apawu, we're grateful for your time. I didn't get to hear your personal thoughts on the judgment, though. Are you ready to give me that?
It's not easy to, I didn't get enough time to formulate my thoughts. You just called me about a minute or so before you started the program. So I'm sure in future there will be more time for me to compose my thoughts on it.
Okay, I look forward to it. Thank you very much. That's lawyer Martin Apawu, private legal practitioner there. We've been speaking on this. But you know that when this issue started in the early days of the Akufo-Addo administration, many former appointees of the NDC administration, each time members of the NPP or government accused them of corruption, they responded by challenging the government to drag them to court. And this is one thing that we've seen, at least William Tete TV, of course, the board chairman of the NCA, Eugene Bafo-Boni, and then the former Deputy National Security Coordinator, all under the John Mahama administration today. This is where we are. They've been found guilty for causing financial loss to the state. According to the judge, they were reckless and acted with impunity in the purchase of cyber surveillance equipment worth $4 million. Let's bring in lawyer Boabinge Samoa. He's the MP for Adenta and also the Communications Director of the NPP. We are grateful for your time here on Newsnight. I bring you in because of the political turn that this issue took from the very beginning. Your government, for instance, was dared to take anyone that they feel had done any wrong or was involved in any corruption issues to be taken to court. We've seen this one. This is the very first. But how significant is this case for you, seeing that is the first successful case to be prosecuted under this administration?
Before the judgment today, including this one, you realize that there are nearly about 40 people before the courts. And therefore, to bring in a conviction at this time demonstrates clearly the focus of the Attorney General's office. They are to be congratulated for delivering on their duty, an onerous duty. It's not easy to prosecute corruption.
So I was asking exactly for you how significant this one is, because this is the only one that we've seen logical conclusion to, Mr. Papi. I know there are others, of course.
It is significant to the extent that, as you yourself said, there's been brazen brashness, including from the former president himself, who took joy in stepping up on platforms, political platforms, and telling the whole wide world that if anybody was corrupt, they should be taken to court and jailed, as if he didn't appreciate the process. It wasn't just merely saying that somebody was corrupt, but one had to prove it in a court of law. So success in a court of law is significant, because it means that, yes, these events did happen, and they can be proven, and they can exact convictions. And therefore, it goes to show that whatever the former president chose to project by daring the government shows that in the end he was either mistaken or he assumed too much, that it would not be easy to prove, but it has been done. It has been done. So this is hugely significant.
Okay, but issues of witch hunting comes up, and also the deliberate delay of the case, dragging it into an election year to destabilize the opposition.
Who drags a case? The government? The judiciary, the judges, the Attorney General's office. And therefore, you should be familiar with the court processes in this country. I'm even amazed that it's been able to come in at all, because it takes years and years. And when accused persons begin to go to the Supreme Court to try themselves out on technicalities, seeking to stimulate a trial, then you realize that it's not the government's effort or the judges. It is the accused persons who seek to stop the process here and now, sometimes, as often as possible. It challenges the authority of the process, challenges the technical processes, challenges every inch of the way, right up to the Supreme Court. And in our system is such that whenever there's a challenge, the main trial has to stop for the subsidiary matter that has come up to be determined, because that subsidiary matter could influence the direction of the main trial. So I don't think government deliberately sat back, or should I say the Attorney General, because it's not about the entire government, it's about the Attorney General prosecuting, a duty, a constitutional duty, prosecuting. I don't think the Attorney General sat back and determined that in the last year of the current administration, they would bring in a conviction. It's not, the conviction doesn't even depend on them. It's a conviction by the judiciary. We need to appreciate the different arms at work here. And we need to appreciate that the defendants have been afforded every opportunity to defend themselves at law, before the law, and within their rights.
Well, you dispute the issue about the deliberate dragging. For instance, you've highlighted the roles of the various arms. I accept, but we're talking about filing processes. For instance, you've talked about 40 others that are in the pipeline to be prosecuted. But I'm asking about the filing process. For instance, is that not part of the delay, or that one is also the fault of the judiciary?
One has to be very well prepared if one is going to prosecute corruption. This is something that all the beneficiaries seek to hide, because all sides are culpable. You pay bribes, you can't give too much evidence because you are culpable. You receive bribes, you are scared of giving evidence because you are culpable. And so building a case in a corruption situation is extremely difficult. And that is why the Attorney General's office is to be commended. They've successfully prosecuted the case based on the rules. It is not that simple.
And you look forward to more of such sentencing?
I actually look forward to hearing what happens in the case of the government official one. In the Airbus matters, I want to hear what happens in those matters. Because as of this weekend, there are convictions, increasing convictions around the world in that matter.
But of course, Airbus is not in court
no
yet, is it? It's not in court yet, is it?
Yeah, but I'm saying that I am waiting eagerly to hear and see what happens in that particular matter. Because it is something that is worldwide and is gaining momentum because other countries are into it and getting convictions. The most recent one being the Indonesian one, where the head of the national airline has been convicted and given 8 years for receiving bribes in excess of $3 million in respect of acquisitions. Same things here, same facts, same basis from the courts, and we expect to see action because definitely Ghana has been mentioned, and we need to know and see who government official one, who the other government officials are, and how that case pans out.
It brings me quickly to ask, how about the corruption cases against this government as well? Are you looking for
any cases in court against the government will vigorously be pursued, I'm sure. Are there any cases in court? Are there speculative corruption cases? Are there any cases in court? Because the word corruption becomes a political football in this instance, and that's why I heard you mention witch hunting earlier. When you're in opposition, you say it's witch hunting. When it's in government, then they say it's what? It's what? It's corruption. Whatever action the government takes is corruption. Exactly, Emefa. So can the government govern?
But the concern is, how do you hope to see logical conclusion to corruption cases within this government when some of them have actually been stage managed? Most of them have also been cleared. Then how do you hope?
How do you determine the stage management? It means you don't trust any of the institutions at stake. You don't trust the judiciary. You don't trust the police. You don't trust the investigative bodies. You don't trust anybody. You trust only the opinion of the NDC who say that somebody is corrupt.
I beg your pardon on that, Mr. I beg your pardon on that. I'm only asking you questions. So it's not about not trusting any agency.
You say the investigation.
If you are satisfied with the kind of investigation, then that's fine.
Stage managed is a very heavy word to say of any state institution. That state institution stage managed investigations. It means you have undermined them. You don't trust them. You don't believe in them. You are willing to believe the person who is shouting corruption at the top of their voice. You don't believe the institution which investigated that shout. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Bobo, we are grateful for your time here on Top Story. He's the Director of Communications for the NPP. He's MP for Adenta. Earlier also you heard Lawyer Martin Pebu, who's been interrogating the court's decision today and then looking at the significance as well. The Attorney General is set to seize properties worth $3 million from the former Deputy National Security Coordinator under the John Mahama administration, and 2 ex-top officials of NCA found guilty for causing financial loss to the state. Top Story is brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Vodafone, the future is exciting. Ready? And of course, Gassim, the nation builder. Coming up shortly on Top Story, our Newsnight, a view from within the NDC concerned about John Mahama's delay in naming a running mate for the 2020 elections. MP for Boko Central, Mahama Yariga, says his flag bearer is running out of excuses for not announcing his running mate.
Our flag bearer should have nominated a running mate by now. He was chosen long ago, and so he's had enough time. After a while, he will lose the sympathy of COVID as an excuse. There has been a delay.
We have more on that coming up shortly. Also, Supreme Court Justice nominee Yoni Kulendi advocates a Supreme Court without a limit or cap on the number of judges who can be appointed there.
And there have been practical situations where the Chief Justice was hamstrung in finding the requisite number of judges to deal with a particular matter or the other.
But was Professor Henrietta Mensah Bonsu offered the top job by the EC?
No, nobody had approached me for anything. And yet I kept seeing headlines. Somebody even had a headline explaining why I turned it down. And it was a very difficult time for me.
I have more from today's virgin mining town of Obuasi, accounting for 80% of all COVID-19 cases in the Ashanti region, as 533 people in the township are infected.
Yeah, was the funny work man. Residents, especially traders, still doubt the prevalence of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We'll tell you about how a couple infected 17 contacts in the town now consider the epicenter for the spread of the virus.